So welcome back to the Prescription to Travel MD podcast. I'm Dr. Courtney Downes, and I am super excited about our guest here today. I think she probably needs an introduction because most of you probably know her or have heard of her and all the amazing things that she's done within the physician community. But we have Dr. Sunny Smith here. She is the founder of Empowering Women Physicians. It is an amazing group of women. She does coaching. They have an extensive Facebook presence, and she plans retreats and all sorts of events where women can kind of come together and support each other and really uplift each other. And so I am really just happy to have her here today and tell us a little bit more about herself and her journey and all the amazing things that she's done and has coming up. So without further ado.
Hello. Great to be here.
All right, Sunny. So tell us a little bit about how you got started with medicine, your journey to coaching, and all the things that you're doing now.
Going way back, journey into medicine. Well, I would say, my brother was born with a disability. He was born with spina bifida, and he's older than me. So ever since I can remember, the physicians had a really crucial presence in our family's lives, from surgeries to everything you could imagine, and everything sort of would hang on. I wonder what the doctor will say. I wonder what the doctor will say. And so I sort of just always heard how meaningful and impactful that was. So when it came time for me to choose what to do with my life, I was like, this would be really meaningful if I was able to impact people sort of in a similar way. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I just wanted to help people. So that's what I decided to do. I didn't have any mentors, or I didn't really know what to do. And so I ended up taking a couple of years off in between. I did biotech research and then started the application process. I got into one place. New York Medical College was the only place, with basically no time left to go on Friday afternoon because we started orientation on Monday. I got a call from UC San Diego at 4:30 p.m. and they're like, you're next on the list, because this was a time where there was no cell phones. And so they would go down the list of 5 people each day. And you can imagine by August, everyone's just gone and traveling in Latin America or whatever. So they went through all of these people and they came to me, and my life, of course, changed forever based on that one phone call. Then I sort of became a physician at UC San Diego, and they, again, I'm like, if you want to know how I got into medicine, this is way back. So I happened to show up at a place where there was a significant underserved cohort looking to make a difference in the world. So we worked on starting and expanding a student-run free clinic, and that sort of became my passion and my career from that point forward.
Got it. So you were in San Diego and working in the clinic, and now you're here. So what happened in between that time?
So, I went away. I did my residency. I sort of had a significant illness during my residency, from no work hour restrictions and sleep deprivation, and led to seizures and all that stuff. And I just wanted to get back and get better. So I did. And then I came back to UC San Diego because I had said as a med student, when they were like, what do you want to do? What specialty you want? I'm like, I just want to do this. Whatever specialty allows me to work in the basement of a church and see people affected by homelessness and undocumented people and teach medical students and all that. That's the specialty I want. So I chose family medicine. And then by the time I came back, it went from selling Rice Krispie treats and t-shirts for fundraisers to actually having a funded position for a medical director. So I became the medical director, which included a lot of initially informal advising for medical students. Anybody who works with trainees knows that if you're just approachable and present, you can see trainees have a lot of distress, right? And it's not really about diabetes, right? It's cloaked under diabetes or hypertension, but it's really, how do you become, a kind physician that cares about people's humanity and a kind teacher that cares about people's humanity? So then when they opened up this sort of wellness or leadership or director position called an academic community director, I was invited to apply for that. And then I formally became in charge of student and trainee wellness. I was fortunate enough to be somewhere where the person who's now the chief medical officer for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention was a friend and a colleague and a mentor. So I learned a lot about that and became very comfortable talking about that. And so as life evolved, I feel like I've been doing physician wellness work for decades, have been in documentaries back in the day. and I'm still present doing that work, but it transitioned from medical students over to attending faculty members. And in fact, you get a lot of rapid feedback about how amazing it is with faculty or attendings, because like we have an 8-week coaching program now, and you can get huge change in 8 weeks. Whereas for a med student, it takes like 4 years for them to get through, and then 3 more years at minimum residency. So it's like a several year cycle.
So you went from doing wellness and education within the med school, and now you're working with attendings, and you said you had an 8-week program. So tell me a little bit about that.
So we have an 8-week coaching program that we do one-on-one coaching, private coaching for the things that people just want more privacy around. We do small groups where people connect in medical education. You sort of have this idea that best practices around 10 people can really get to know each other with enough diversity of experience and still small enough to connect. So people sometimes like make super good friends for well beyond, which is what you've experienced. You've met some of the people who've been in my program, and that's your experience of them. And then we have larger group workshops where we bring in sort of like, experts, physician coaches, but then also national experts and internationally recognized authors and things like that, so that it's really kind of meaningful and impactful. And we focus on self-compassion, awareness. One of our best outcomes is burnout, where we go from 70-something% to like 30-something% in 8 weeks, which is pretty remarkable. So that's sort of our focus, is the wellness of women physicians. Yeah.
Yeah. So part of the mission of Prescription to Travel MD was just creating a space where people can feel like, hey, it's okay to take rest. It's okay to take my time off. It's okay to take care of myself. And so I just love that you're also like empowering women to do the same thing.
I would say medicine kind of hands you this thing where like you work 80 hours or you work 60 hours, or if you're really, really lucky, you work 40 hours, but you all have to fit inside this box that was designed like over 100 years ago for white men with no children who lived in the hospital, who then had stay-at-home mothers, right? And we're on cocaine, by the way, like legitimately. So that's the model in which we are still practicing that has extended over 100 years. Things might be a little different now.
It's like, keep going, you got this.
Exactly. So I think our generation, and particularly after COVID, because we needed workplace flexibility, and we proved that we could implement workplace flexibility when there was a necessity. So now I think it's up to particularly, women are kind of leading the charge, because we tend to leave medicine at higher rates and find that we have like the second shift and all of these things. So if we stand up and demand things have to be different, or we'll leave, right? Like if you won't give me 0.8 or 0.6, like you don't get me, then the workplace kind of has to start changing. And so it creates a lot more space for, as people have taken sabbaticals, people can take a lot more leave than they're usually offered. And just like life can be more on your terms than you think it can be. Because most people think, yeah, nice for you, that doesn't apply to me. And it's like, really? If you really believed it applied to you, how would you show up? Like say, for instance, as a thought exercise, if you were like financially independent, what would you allow at your work? Or if you knew you had another job waiting in the same city with the same things you loved, what would you tolerate, And because people just feel trapped, and so they do things a certain way. But it's like, if you weren't trapped, what would you ask for? What would you want? What would you expect? And allowing yourself to dream a little bit for that, and then get a little bit closer day by day.
I wish more people could adapt that same attitude. Even so, like as an ER doctor, so we went to PIMDCon a couple weekends ago, and so they show this graph of like ER doctors at the bottom being like higher rate of dying earlier. And
yes, like literally dying earlier, because like people show these things that are about burnout and about leaving medicine and all this stuff, but it's like, no, legitimately the lifespan is shortened.
Yeah, you're leaving the earth.
Yes. What a worse outcome than your own mortality by choosing to continue to comply and be complicit in a system that is abusing us, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I became, the rest of the conference, everyone would come, oh, you're at the bottom of the chart. I'm like, yeah, but I'm changing my trajectory. Like that's not where I'm going. That's why I'm here.
Yes. And so I think that's so wise to find your individual agency within a system where the average and standard deviations predict a certain thing. And it's like, that doesn't have to be your story, right? So your specialty is actually a specialty where people can have a lot more flexibility should they choose to exercise it and insist on it, because it is shift work. And there's lots of different ways to do it. People are like, not in my practice. We literally walk people through this all the time in our program. And they're like, not me. And then I'm like, let me introduce you to 10 other emergency physicians who have done this, right? Who do it on their own terms, their own way, depending on their family, their background, what they need. Yeah.
Right. And that's what it's about. Like, I think seeing other people doing it and knowing that it's possible, like if you don't see it, you don't know it's possible. But if you can imagine, like, what if it was possible? Like, what would you do?
Exactly. That's why I think community is so important, because by yourself, it's hard to come up with. And then for each person who does it to realize that then you're an example for people around you. Even if they're not talking about it, they see it and they're like, that person did da-da-da as an example of something that some people can do sometimes. And maybe, just maybe, they might one day.
Right. I know. And I'm thinking maybe, just maybe I might next week in Toronto.
Exactly. See, that's all we have to do. You have several friends coming with us on a trip to Toronto. It's going to be very impactful and magical and memorable. And all you have to do is sort of like drop, my coach calls them like possibility drops. Like, maybe it's possible, maybe, just maybe, there might be another human that could cover your shift. Because we're like, no, I can't. And it's like, okay, what if you got COVID that day? Right? What if you got diarrhea that day? What if you broke your arm that day? What if you're in a car accident that day? Right? They would find a way to cope. But that is the system in which we practice, which is like, only if we are completely forbidden physically from showing up is the only reason that we will not show up, because we want to be a quote unquote team player. And when we're asked to be team players, it's usually when we're overextending ourselves beyond what we would want to do, because everyone else is too. And so they are expecting everyone to do the same, because like medicine just doesn't have a deep bench. And so it's like, if you go out, someone's got to cover, and you're like, yeah, so why don't we have a backup built in? You know, why? Because we are human, period. It's always going to be that way.
I just had a similar conversation with a friend of mine who's a nurse practitioner. And I was just saying, like physicians, like we don't call off. I've been in practice, it's been 13 years, I'm dating myself, but 13 years, since residency. And the only time I ever didn't come into work was after my father died. And so like every day, if you're sick, you show up. And I was like, and nurses call in all the time. And she's like, yeah, we do. And I'm like,
it's a different culture. I mean, we do these reflections. Like one time, actually, because of course in Toronto, we're having Liz Gilbert and Martha back. And Martha came into our coaching program probably like early 2021. And it was just, COVID was starting to go down a little bit. And people were reflecting on not taking care of themselves and examples of when they didn't. I mean, it was heart-wrenching, the stuff that they were typing in that they didn't call out for, right? It starts with like migraines, and then it's miscarriages, and it's like pyelo, and it's all of the things you can imagine that a woman could go through. And they keep showing up. People showed up with IVs, right? They're getting IVs so that they can continue to operate or continue in the ICU. Like, that's why. Why do we feel that that's required? And even like when your father died, I'm guessing, because when my family members were sick or died, it's like you still have this, can I really go? How long can I go? How much am I imposing on others? And it's that weight is heavy to carry around for like 30 years.
It is. So kudos to you for making it so that we don't feel that we have to carry that anymore.
I mean, it's still there, right? Like it's indoctrinated in us. It's an internal voice coming from inside of us now. And we can recognize it, have compassion for it, understand where it came from, know whose voice it is, and then say, and what else is possible, right? And what else?
Because you can choose to continue on that path, or you can choose to say, yeah, what else? What else is out there for me?
And I find around mid-career, people get particularly like mid-career, midlife, we're like, what are we doing? This becomes like this awareness of what's going to be the cost.
I think that's where I'm at now.
Yes, exactly. Of continuing to do this another 10 or 20 years, right? What is the cost of that? These are our youngest years for everyone listening, right? Everyone, whether you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, like you're not going to be any younger, healthier, more mobile, right, than you are right now. So why not now? What are we waiting for? Whose permission are we waiting for?
Exactly. Well, my husband, he's a hospitalist. And so like he's on a 12-day stretch now. And he'll be offered, he gets a weekend to recover. And he's been doing this since we moved here. So about like the last 5 years now. We always talk about like what's the next step? Because I don't know how long like this isn't sustainable.
Sustainability is a great point. It's like we've created a system that is not sustainable for the humans in it. And it relies upon those humans to function at 100% the entire time, which is not sustainable. So 12 days, like in what other profession? And as a hospitalist, he has all the people who have very significant needs that are so sick they can't even make it outpatient. So let's have him be tired all the time and, not know when he's going to sleep and not be able to rest and not be able to eat and not be able to do all the things that normal people do. It's, as you said, it's just not sustainable. So the question is, what is sustainable for us and how do we design for that? It's like disruptive to have to completely disrupt the status quo.
So I disrupt his status quo.
Exactly.
By dragging him along on vacations. And so we booked the trip when we went to Europe this summer, and, it was kind of the worry in the back of his mind as well. I can't take all those days off. Like, who's going to cover my ships? And I'm like, they'll figure it out. If you can't come in, they'll figure it out. And they figured it out. And we had a great time.
They always do. I mean, one day all of us are going to be off the face of this earth, and the system will still go, and there will still be patients who need care, and everybody will figure it out, right? They will figure it out. I was in Europe this summer too. And in fact, it was July. And, we even had people who were program directors. And like, if you're a program director in July, that is not a time that you usually would take off, right? But the thing is, if you have the example and you say, I'm going to set an example, even for our interns, it's okay to take time for yourself. In fact, you're better for it if you take time for yourself. And so there was all kinds of people who were in clinical medicine, who are no longer in clinical medicine, people who did like an in between. Some of the people came for longer and shorter, even if they were in clinical medicine, right? But then made some of it work for some part of their summer. And it's really beautiful to see all these different lived examples of how everybody made that work.
And so where were you this summer?
We went to Greece. We went to Syros, and actually you mentioned PIMDCon. And so originally, it was going to be me, Peter Kim, Bonnie Koo, Leticia Alto, Kenji Asakura. And then sort of over time, we had planned over a year in advance to go. They plan a year in advance. I plan like a week in advance if I'm lucky. So I was like, you could grow an entire human in your body and give birth between now and then. Like, that's a long time. We don't even know if we'll be alive. We don't even know what's going on. But they're like, we need to plan in advance for summers for our children. I'm like, okay. So I did. So we were all set to go. And then sort of like there were mumblings, people talking with friends about going. And so the group got bigger and bigger. And then there was sort of a significant crew of us over there. And I never would have chosen Syros. Like I didn't have like a lifelong, let's go to Syros, like I do about Bora Bora or things like that. But I was the one who said, why don't we go on the ocean, on the water, because I love the water. And so it was like one of the most beautiful things about being there is because it was extended for a lot of people. It was 4 weeks. For some, it was 3, for 2, for 1. But the majority of people were there for 4 weeks because they had planned so far in advance. They had arranged for it, and they could work remotely, obviously, for a lot of things. So what was so stunning, I think, to most of us was the unrushed, like what slower life looks like going to breakfast and sitting in a cafe and like talking for 2 or 3 hours. People just don't do that. We don't do that. And to have all of us together, different factions of people, of course, it's not like 30 people are having breakfast together the same day. But just to have humans that you knew and loved and appreciated and wanted to connect with available and around. And then you go do a little work and then you come back. And then, over there, there's like this siesta time where people truly, the shops close down, the restaurants close down. And then you come back out in the evening when it's cooler because it's very hot in the summer. And like all the children are out playing in the street, sort of unsupervised, starting at 9 p.m. You're like, you would get arrested in the US if you let your children meander around. But like, that's what everyone was doing. And so it was really beautiful to experience the different culture, again, and a much slower life. And then when you have reentry into your old life, you're like, wow, you notice the contrast. Right. So you kind of have to remove yourself from your day to day in many ways to notice the contrast of possibilities that are available. And then you ask yourself, why am I choosing this? And do I want to keep choosing this? Yeah.
Sometimes it makes it harder, I think, to go back to your reality. You're like, oh, I needed this break, but now I got the break. And now I think, what is my life like?
I know. And so I think many of us were talking at the end about what are we going to bring back from this? And how are we going to sort of implement little pieces of this in our real life coming back. And so I think each one of us has tried to do that a little bit.
I was going to say, what's the solution?
Intention. Like even some of the things are like, I mentioned breakfast. So it's like, how do you want to do breakfast together as a family, or how many days a week do you want to do a slow breakfast together? And where can that possibly fit in? I mean, most of us have some weekends. If you work weekends, then most of us have some other days. You could do it like before drop off, after drop off. You can take some half days. You can take full days. You can take an extra week. Any kind of that slowness, or can you put it into dinner? Can you put it in with meals with your friends? And just, not being so rushed from place to place to place.
Slow down.
Yes. Where are we all going? Right? And even like all these children's after school activities, like, where are they going and why? And why in such a hurry? And what are we role modeling for them? Right? So anyway, those were my reflections, some of my reflections on coming back. And also the connection with people. Like, it's really the humans in our lives that matter. Everything else is kind of noise, because we worry so much about like achieving and seeing more patients, going faster and earning enough and saving enough and paying off the house, paying off the student loans. It's like you miss all the humans in your life and the opportunity to connect with them, because we're also focused on this, treadmill or hamster in a wheel type of thing for many of us, not all.
For most of us, unless you're intentional. You really have to work at being able to focus on those things. It's not something that just comes natural for the majority of us. So you plan these events so that way people get a chance to be able to relax and slow down. And I've heard amazing things about Bora Bora and Puerto Rico. And you mentioned Bora Bora, so that was a lifelong dream for you to go there, or how'd that come about?
I mean, I never would have thought it was available for me in general in my life, just sort of the way I grew up and, how things were in med school, and like there just wasn't a lot extra. And that was certainly never on my agenda. I used to think if I ever made $100,000 a year as an attending, I would be like the richest person on earth. Which most attendings now know who would be listening to that. They'd be pissed if they were at that level, right? So I had kind of wanted to go there when I was going to get married. And then I found out, because it would be like a dream destination, right? And then I found out that it's France. And so they have these rules. You have to be there for like 30 days in advance. You have to have everything translated into French. And I was like, this is not going to work with what I need to happen in my life, right? And so it was during summer. As I mentioned, I'm an academic. And so I needed to be back in August so that we could do the white coat ceremony. I could say people's names. I could put, their coat on them. We could do the Hippocratic Oath. And so I was looking all over, and I found that the Cayman Islands, because I wanted it to be a beach, beautiful wedding. And the Cayman Islands is sort of like the Vegas of tropical islands getting married. So we did that. And because it's easy to show up and have it done, and it was beautiful. And then I thought, well, some other day we'll go do this. And so then when I was having a 40th birthday, we sort of said, like, what could we do that was memorable and special and different? And so that's what we came up with. And it felt incredibly, ridiculously out of reach and out of what I would typically do, because my vacations were typically like $100 a day. We would sort of budget for it. And then I thought it was like being crazy when it was like 300. I really was like, this is insane. And again, I was almost 40 years old and attending. I just wasn't used to it. And then in my free clinic patients, of course, I was like, I could spend on this vacation the amount that they have for their family in a year, And so that felt very disproportionate. I decided that I was going to do it. And then once I was there and I brought my little boy, my husband, I was like, I just had this sort of opening revelation. I was like, how has this been available to me my entire life on this planet? Like, this place has existed this entire time. And I was so busy with my nose down, not even accumulating any more vacation days, because I had accumulated so many that you couldn't continue to accumulate them. You didn't get paid out or anything. They just stopped accumulating. I was like, what have I been doing? Why have I not been making things like this happen? And so I just sort of went back with this new perspective. And I thought those things, again, weren't available to me. And we were so frugal that while we were there, we were like boiling eggs in the teapot. We went and got soup, like from the store, cans of soup and like bags of pasta at the Four Seasons. This is what we're doing. Serious. I know, because I had a little boy, he was a toddler, and I'm like, I'm not going to order like $100 room service for you. So we would try to do that to like decrease the expenses at the end. Like, that's how unusual it was for me. And anyway, it was really worth it. It was so beautiful. And who knew that my life would sort of change because of that trip? So once I became a coach and wanted to help other women physicians change the way they saw things, I was like, this is one thing that really changed it for me. And it's kind of like part of the coaching is the ask, leave your life, leave your family, leave your job, come halfway across the world just for you, and trust, and you're worth it, and trust everything back home will figure itself out. Kind of like we've been talking about, right? And when the first thing we did was have everybody reflect on what was it, how did you make the decision? When did you make the decision? What was that like? Because it's reflective of a whole bunch of other decisions you can make if you choose to choose yourself once you go back home in these different ways. And everyone remembered the moment they clicked, right? The moment they entered their credit card, the moment, because like once you do that, all the other things have to fall into place. And so I'm like, life is full of those moments. Like if you make a decision, the equivalent of clicking, you find a way. I mean, we've had one person from the entire years that we've been doing this who went to the airport and forgot that her passport didn't have 6 months left. So she called me at like 3 a.m. from the airport. She ended up not coming. I'm like, you can get an emergency passport. You can come for half the trip. She chose that it was just not going to be the right time for her. But pretty much everyone else who has the opportunity, for the most part is like, I'm going to figure out how to make this work. And so, the question is, how do you make that work elsewhere? And a lot of those people had never been on a luxury vacation. Some of them had never left their children or their family. So it's just like that, again, that whole possibility thing.
Yeah, that's so powerful. So they got there. And so what can you expect when you come to these type of events?
Oh my goodness. I'm so funny, right? I told you like I'm very last minute. And so I'm late. I mean, I'm the kind of person who's like, when I was lecturing, at the medical school, quote unquote lecturing, it would be teaching because lecturing is not the most effective adult education process, right? But when I was invited to give classes or the director of classes, I just don't believe that a ton of structure or PowerPoint is what people need. And so you meet them where they are, and if you are confident enough in your skill set, you can walk into any hospital room, any exam room, any teaching situation and know that you're going to deliver what people need, right? And so in my coaching programs, and in particularly in the in-person ones, we just, of course, have some structure, like we're going to do 8 to 12, right? We have breakfast in the morning, then we do our sessions, and then some days I have like activities that are, amazing and you never forget because they're so remarkable and such a remarkably beautiful place. But from 8 to 12, I'm like, we're going to coach. So what you got? Like, what's going on in your life right now? And people go around and we pass around microphones, and there's so much similarity in what people are going through, and we identify so much with each other. And then we just sort of support people through the next phases of their decisions. And of course, I have like ideas of how it will progress throughout the week, but we continue to hold on to what is present for each person and what they need. And that it becomes, in my opinion, and in the opinions of the people that you met who came, really meaningful. And then, as is the case for many conferences, in-person events, anything where you put together like-minded physicians, they go off on their own. Like say it's a night where I have nothing planned. They have all these beautiful memories of sitting on the dock together, watching the sunset, having a very personal reflection together and making decisions when they go home, how they're going to be different. And so some people choose to leave their jobs. Some people choose to go part-time. Some people choose something about their relationship. Some people have diagnoses. There's so many things that happen. Like the last time that we went, someone decided they were going to make a nonprofit, and a whole bunch of us decided we were going to donate. And they received tens of thousands of dollars in donations to go forth with their mission in the world to make an impact. And so it's just like people really, truly supporting each other. I mean, like one event, one time in Puerto Rico, we took these like private planes with Liz Gilbert over to a little nearby island, and we're out with these bioluminescence, and it was just like magical. And so you can remember, like today, I actually was in touch with that memory with myself of the magic of the universe. And in fact, I just sent an email about it before I got on this call. But like these moments really do become touch points in our life. Just like for many people, there are times like Greece will always be a touch point in my life where I have memories and new reflections and came back a little bit of a different person. And so some of these events are too. And especially, as I was saying before, the humans are really what make the biggest impact in our lives. That if you bring along sort of a new set of humans who've experienced that journey with you, it's like, how your med school friends, they get you in a way that other people can't. And your residency friends get you in a way that other people can't. So it's like if you go on one of these immersive things, it's not a 4-year med school experience, but it's like they see these like tons of transformations in a very short period of time, if that's what the retreat or program or workshop is intended to do. I mean, some are just lectures that some people go to. People will email me and they'll be like, can I come lecture at your blah, blah, blah? I give talks on blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you obviously don't know me or what we do at all, because we do not do any lectures or talks. This is not a conference. That's a no. Anyway, that's what we do. And there's many ways, right, that are beautiful for people to do these things. Like talks and conferences are amazing. Like the one that you just talked about was a conference and it was helpful. And there's just many different ways to show up and to travel and to connect. And there's also like being on your own, right? Like going to Miraval on your own versus going to Miraval with a like-minded group of friends versus going there on a retreat with other women physicians. All of them are helpful in very different ways.
I guess what's coming up with Toronto, that'll be in just a week or two, right?
Yeah, I mean, depending on when this becomes published, yes, it's October, I think 21st and 22nd. So of all of the sessions we've had in EWP, we've been a company now for 6 years. And we've had, I don't even know how many sessions or how many hours and hours of sessions. I know we've had about 10,000 hours of one-on-one coaching, but I don't know the numbers on our workshops. Let's just say they're not short, and let's just say there's not few of them. Some of the absolute favorites are people who have come through agents. And so we're contractually obligated that we can only show those workshops for a short period of time, say 3 months, 6 months, something like that. And so many of the other things we can keep for a long time. And so people who've been in the program request and have the reflections. These were some of the most meaningful workshops, and they remember them years later and they stop me in the hallways, right? And when we're at conferences and talk about those sessions. And so Liz Gilbert and Martha Beck are two of those people. And some of my clients had noticed that they were going to be doing an event together, and they're like, EWP should, that's what the like abbreviation for my group, EWP should have a meetup there. EWP should host something there. EWP is going to be there. I'm signing up. Sunny, will you host something? And so I was like, how could I not?
So they planned the event for you and you're just showing up.
Well, exactly. So there was going to be there is a public bigger event. And so I contacted their agent. It took me 9 months, honestly, to get the full agreement for everybody to stay and to do a very small, intimate reflection with both of them, with women physicians only, with our people. So we're going to do that, and we're going to continue to have coaching, of course, like I was talking about, on the issues that people are facing. We're going to have 2 days of that, and then we have a whole month virtual support again, so you can implement these things. It's like the equivalent of, I think of everything as medical education since that was my life. But it's like if I gave you a talk or an interactive session or a problem-based learning on a topic, and then I was like, okay, you got it covered. Okay, bye. What are the chances those people would really know how to implement it and would feel comfortable on the wards implementing it already and to take care of patients, right? It's like nothing, the percentage wise of confidence. Then if you actually go home with this information, for instance, your ideas, you attempt to implement it, you fall flat on your face, you get a lot of pushback. People are like, hell no, who do you think you are? We don't act that way around here. We don't do things like that around here. And then you come back to us and you're like, well, I tried, it didn't work. And we're like, no, duh. So now go back out, right? And they decide how they're going to sort of iterate and stay in alignment with what they want to do. So I personally believe, the same with Bora Bora, we do a month along with the sessions, right? So that we can support people to really get results. And we do that with Puerto Rico, those retreats, we've done that in San Diego when we had a retreat there. And then who knows what will be next. I always take things one thing at a time. I feel like that really works best for myself. And we have to choose what works best for ourselves. We have the opportunity to. And so I teach my clients that works best for them too. Because I'm like, you don't want to have a whole year scheduled, and you don't want to have to wait until 2026 to do something. And so this is what we're doing right now. If this fits your needs in your life right now, come. And if it doesn't, that's okay. Only you know. And so listen to your own self. Like for you, for this is like real conversation. You're really deciding if you're really going to join us. And I'm like, if it's the right thing, you'll make it happen. And if not, we're not going to make ourselves wrong. We're going to say, I choose not to go this time. I'm going to have the joy of missing out instead of the fear of missing out.
That's what I'm going to be I'll be having this self-talk.
Exactly. And then you can also be like to your friends, like take notes like you're going to teach it. Because if you take notes like you're going to teach it, you learn so much more and you pay attention so much more. So be like, bring me home like a few highlights and explain to me why they matter. Because sometimes the feeling in the rooms of these things doesn't translate exactly the same to outside the room, but you get to try, you get to attempt to say why that was meaningful to you. And it's always the why. There are some coaching concepts and ways to understand that why is not a useful question because it can be unhelpful. But if you use it if you use it in a helpful way, why does this matter to you? Why is this important? Why was that so meaningful inside of the session for you that you wanted to bring it to me? Then it can be revealing, at least.
So I guess I shouldn't ask you when the next event is.
I don't know. Whenever anyone emails me or my admin, she's like, I got no idea. This Sunny, I got no idea. I can tell you because really people are like, I'm coming the next time. I'm like, well, good luck to you then because I don't even know when the next time is. So I think it fits best for me if I do that I don't know when the next one is. I'm being honest when I say that. So I'm not trying to create like artificial scarcity or urgency, but I'm like, you want to come, this is what's happening. Will I ever hold another? I truly don't know. Like, you never know what's happening tomorrow.
I don't know if this episode will be out before they go, but there'll be a post Facebook group tomorrow.
If not, we will present learnings from what we learned. Yeah. And how we maybe implemented them in different examples of different people's lives. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's really neat because I think a lot of the retreats and different programs that people have, you go to them and then there's always like okay, what next? Like when you're there, you're elated. There's just a different vibe that's, in the room, like you said. And then you get home and you're back to your like normal 9 to 5, picking up the kids, taking them to sports. Like what next? Like, yeah. Do you lose all of that?
Yeah, I do have to say there is like a little post at times you can ask your friends who went. There's like a re-entry, almost like, I don't want to say depression, but just like shock, I guess I would say. There's a re-entry shock because you just spent an entire week, for instance, like reflecting about your whole life and all the deepest things. And you go back and everyone's like acting normal, carrying on with normal things. You're like, wait, you don't want to hear about all my deepest, darkest reflections and how I'm going to change my whole life. You just got to go back. But then it's, again, the reintegration of stuff. Like I was just randomly saying about Greece. It's like choosing on purpose who is safe to share that with, right? And again, what you want to take action on now. It's often like, some people take a huge leap and some people just start with the small things that compound over time. And again, this isn't like necessarily a promotion for my things. It's like you can find your own people in your own city because most people are kind of sick of things the way they are, like literally most people. So if you have a handful of friends, you can start reflecting with them and be like, let's talk about this, and get started with something.
Very nice. Well, if there are others who are looking to find you or get on your mailing list so that way they know how to reach out to you if and when you do have another event or conference or course set up, how can they find you?
I'm Empowering Women Physicians, so you can find me at empoweringwomenphysicians.com. There they can click and they can find a guide, like it's something like the ultimate coaching guide for women physicians, because it really does go through pretty much exactly the types of ways that we look at things inside our coaching program. And that coaching program is the most effective physician wellness program ever documented. So like that, it works. As I said, you can use it with your friends if you don't want to join, right? Or you can do it on your own. I will say community really helps. So they can download the guide, then they're on our email list, or they can get specifically on a retreat wait list. Although, as I said, who knows when the next one is? But they could be on the wait list. And honestly, most people are on there for a while because they have to like wrap their mind around going. Some come like right away, but most people need some time to decide this is going to work for them. And then of course, I would say, I'm every single day in our Facebook group. So if someone is a woman physician and we can prove that you're a woman physician when you try to join the group, if you can, then we will accept you into the group and be glad to advise, mentor, coach, provide sympathy, empathy, support any way that we can. So
You can find all the things.
exactly. So that's how they can find me. Oh, I do, since these are podcast listeners, I do have a podcast, I'll say. I'm an intermittent podcaster, yet I hear from others that it can be very helpful.
Yeah, it has been very helpful. I remember I was listening. I think we went to Disney World a couple of years ago, and I was there, and we took a break, and we went back to the yacht club, and I was like standing on the steps, and I was like trying to upload the podcast because I think you had just released it, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm going to do this coaching, and my husband's like, what are you doing? We're at Disney World. I'm like, I have to listen to this.
This is super important at Disney World right now. You know what's so funny? I think that your memory is so telling and a great example, because so many people tell me they know exactly where they were, exactly what they were doing, just like I said, when they clicked to come to Bora Bora, but in a moment of the podcast. And it's like, emotional memories are so fascinating, right? When we think about the human brain and what we remember and what we don't. But like, you remember the exact moment and where you were and why you were listening.
Yeah, I can see myself standing on that step.
Yes. So if anyone goes over to listen, they might remember, because it's usually like during a significant, either a pain point or a, something in their life that drove them there. And then you will remember, and then it makes you listen more, and it makes you remember more, and it makes you take action more, because obviously, look at you here.
I know, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, all the things.
Yeah, well, it's all, again, you can never imagine where it ends up. Like, I would never imagine where I ended up at all, not even close, not in my wildest dreams. And it's just, once you start taking action, it starts helping you to continue to be aligned with what you want and to dream bigger than you ever thought. Because it's not all about distress. It's like realizing there are other ways, and realizing you can impact people in ways outside a one-to-one clinical room, right? So there's all different kinds of ways it could look. And some of it is huge success. Some is like big, hairy, audacious goals. And some are like a Saturday off, right? And it's all of it integrated and available to different people for different reasons.
Well, thanks again, Sunny. It was a pleasure having you. I think so many people are going to benefit from just listening to your conversation. Your words, they're always so impactful and so meaningful to myself and to so many other women physicians, and I'm sure to other non-women and non-physicians. So
exactly. The one thing I'll say about that comment is that I didn't even realize how exclusionary I was being in naming my podcast until someone that I was like reflecting on and speaking about in the podcast, I asked if she wanted to come on, and she's like, I don't really fully identify to be on women physicians, and consider if you might change the language. And so at our last retreat, even, it's like, the little star WOMYN, right? And, to try to be less exclusionary, more inclusive. And then, of course, we have people of all genders and practices, and not just physicians, et cetera, listening. So yes, welcome one, welcome all to listen. The messages are public and available and apply to actually all humans and not even just physicians. So thank you for mentioning that.
Thanks again, Sunny.
All righty. Thank you. Bye.